to be a short stream, and we'll see how well that goes. Sorry, again, it's a live stream rather than recorded, just because I still don't know how to record videos. It's easier for me to just live stream. Anyway, I wanted to do a quick follow-up to some of what was discussed last night, probably 2 nights ago for some of you guys that'll be seeing this in the morning tomorrow for me. Anyway, I was on a stream with Academic Agent and Shinobi Yaka and several other people, and we were discussing, we got into science just very, very briefly, and this is mainly addressed to Shinobi Yaka, as he was a little shocked at my position on some things. And I just wanted to go into that somewhat, and I'm not jumping right into that. I'm going to give you some background first. I will say, growing up, I was fascinated with science, and I loved studying that. And it was an interesting situation because I was homeschooled. I didn't have teachers to go and bother, which is probably good for the teachers, as I would have just driven them crazy with my many, many questions. Whereas with my mom, she could say, "Look, I only graduated high school. I don't know any of this. You're going to have to look it up on your own." She could teach us spelling and reading and math and all of that sort of things. But as far as the complicated, specialized subjects, she would just say, "Nope, I'll take you to the library. You find the books and you figure it out." And so I did that. I studied a lot on my own. But of course, as a kid, I couldn't figure out everything. And there were a lot of questions I had. So when I went to college, I actually started college at 15. And I was so excited to be able to actually talk to some science professors and ask them some of the questions I had. And one of the big things I wanted to ask them about was gravity. Because growing up, when I started studying science, gravity never made sense to me. I said, how is it possible that the planet has this force field, if you will, or something that it is constantly generating energy that applies a specific force to everything on it? It is constantly pulling on us, so it is exerting a force. That force never runs out. It never lessens. It is constantly being applied to everything. What is the power source of this force, if you will? And why is the power source never exhausted? Does it even have a power source? How does it work? Given that if you go to the center of the earth, you're not at maximum gravity, you're actually minimum gravity because the earth is all around you. How does it work? It's something that just never made sense to me. And so I know it's going to sound silly to a lot of people. Probably most people have never thought of it like that, but this really bothered me as a kid. So when I went to college, in my very first semester there, I'm young, 15-year-old, first time actually in a classroom environment, first time with an actual teacher standing up there. I was so excited. And I don't think I asked right away. I waited like a week or two and then asked my teacher after class one time and said, "Can you explain gravity to me?" And I was asking her all these questions. At first, she just kind of gave me the basic explanation that you read in any science textbook. And I was like, whoa. But see, it doesn't make sense. And I gave her my questions and explained what I was thinking. And she kind of tried to answer, but she couldn't answer my question. So she stopped and she looked at me and she said, "Let's go talk to the head of the physics department, Mr. or Professor, whoever, I don't remember his name." And I said, "Okay." So we went over to the science whatever building, found the head of the physics department, who was just this cutest little guy. I mean, imagine Santa Claus with a gray beard and very short. I mean, that's kind of what he looked like. And it was, anyway, I don't know why I remember what he looked like, and I don't remember his name. But anyway, so I asked him, I said, "Can you explain?" Or actually, my professor did. It's like, "Hey, Elizabeth wants to know about gravity." And so he started explaining it again, basic textbook stuff. And I stopped him. I said, No, I know all that. And I gave him my objections. I said, "It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, I don't understand how you can have gravity and also have, the laws of thermodynamics." I said, "It just doesn't make sense." And I was explaining it to him much better than I am now, because this was like 20 some years ago. I can't remember everything that I said. And he listened, and then he stopped and he said, "Well, you know what? The truth is gravity's not real." And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? And he said, "No." He said, "Newtonian theories of gravity, it was useful in its time to explain it, but we've actually discovered it's not real. That's not what it is." So the truth is," and he went on to explain the theory of warped space. And he gave me the name of a documentary I could watch. He suggested that I go and watch that, and I could learn more about it. And I was thrilled. I was excited. And I went to the college library where you could rent VHS tapes and watch them in a little room there. And you got a key that was attached to a little literal chunk of a 2x4. And you'd go over and you had a little TV and a little VCR. And I watched this documentary and I was just fascinated. I wish I could find it now, but I mean, it was old then, or I mean, I don't know how. It was probably, actually, no, I think it was probably new then, but it's going to be really old now. And I was fascinated, and I was just like, what, how have I never been taught this? And I remember asking him then, I said, "Wait, I said, so gravity's not real. He's like, no, I mean, not technically or something. And I said, okay, why is it still being taught in schools? And he said, because it's easy to understand. And that, as a young 15-year-old girl, infuriated me. I'm like, how dare you teach me something that's false just because the truth is too complicated? I'm like, what? I was so mad. But I mean, as I grew up, I realized, yeah, I mean, it kind of does make sense. But I've heard that then since then from other people, that sometimes they will actually teach things in the science textbooks that aren't true, that, or rather that people used to think were true, but that they have since learned, no, that's actually not the full story. There's more to it, or that doesn't explain everything or whatever. They just still teach the same thing just because it's easier for kids to understand and it's too expensive to rewrite the textbooks. I've heard that argument too. But that really frustrated me. And at that point, I started questioning everything that I had ever learned about science, not about mathematics. Math was my major. My major was not science. Most of the science classes I took were electives, so it was. I had fun with them. I loved them, but it wasn't my main field of study, so I didn't get to go very in depth with it. But another thing that I started looking into then was the theory of evolution. Now, I mentioned in the stream last night that no, actually, I don't think I did. Anyway, I also, well, okay, slight background that I'm not going to go into by any means, but just kind of to give you a little bit of information. I was raised in a conservative Christian home. I was homeschooled. So, and again, my parents focused on giving us the information that was essential for learning how to read, write, spell, add, subtract, and all of that, and then basically would give us the textbooks now that we could read them and understand them and say, now you're going to teach yourself. And I mean, at 15, I was well beyond the other 18 and 20-year-olds in college. So my parents did a really good job, mainly because they were just so scared that they weren't going to do a good enough job, that they pushed us so hard. We ended up being way smarter than we needed to be. So everybody thought we were geniuses and like, oh my goodness, your parents must be absolute geniuses. It's like, no, they just really pushed us hard. But anyway, that wasn't where I was going. Anyway, but because we were in a conservative Christian home, there were some things that we didn't, that we learned, you could say, from a different perspective. Like, for one thing, I knew the theory of evolution existed, and I was taught that, oh, well, that's not true. I was never taught about it. I didn't know much of anything about it growing up. Similarly, I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I was a Christian from a very early age, but it was something that I never really thought about until I was in my mid to late teen years. And that's when I said, hold on, how do I know this is true? And it was two separate fields of study that happened very near the same time. One was Christianity. I asked him, like, am I believing this just because this is something my parents have said, or do I actually believe this? And there were some things about Christianity that I was like, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Things that I would hear in church or in Sunday school. I'm like, I don't get that. So I embarked on a study on my own to say, is this true? And if so, I mean, is there supporting evidence? Is there reason to believe it and all of that? And so I took quite a while to study that. And I did come out of it still as a Christian, but believing slightly different than my parents believe. Slightly, anyway. And that would be fun to talk about some things. Even now, it's interesting how little most Christians know about certain topics in the Bible. It's funny. But anyway, close to the same time was when I decided I want to study evolution, because I'd never studied it. I mean, I'd heard about it, but I had never actually studied it. And not because my parents kept us away from it, because again, with science, it was more, we could pick what we wanted to study and then we could study it. We had to have the basic understanding, but we didn't really go in depth with anything as far as science goes. Neither of my parents were really into science that much. So, that was one that I just never studied because it never interested me. But again, in my late teens, I decided I want to study this. I want to study it for myself. So I started studying that also, because I was like, I want to understand. I want to know, is it true? And I want to understand it. And in studying it, very quickly, a lot of questions came up. Same as with gravity. Gravity didn't make sense to me, even though I could observe it. I could see it. It's like, this is real, but it doesn't make sense. And that was very frustrating to me, because I'm like, I can actually see it, but it doesn't make sense. So then when I actually got an explanation, finally, it was thrilling. It was wonderful. It was eye-opening. I loved it. And I came home and told my siblings, like, gravity's not real. I'm like, you're crazy. What are they teaching you in college? I'm not going to college if that's what they're teaching you. I'm like, oh. Anyway, so then I started studying evolution, and again, a lot of questions came up. I mean, when they talking about the Big Bang, and then the first single-celled organism, and I'm like, whoop, stop. One of my favorite scientists when I was growing up, because I did study different things, was Louis Pasteur. We used to watch this movie. There's an old black and white movie that's the story of, it's not a documentary. It was one of those where it's like historical fiction, even though they didn't say it was fiction. They're like based on the life of Louis Pasteur. I'm sure it was half fiction. I don't, just because they always are. But I loved that movie. We had a book about him, and I loved studying him. And one of the big things that he was is known for, I guess, proving, is that life cannot come from non-life. And that's just a fundamental in the scientific world. And it was so big, it was such a big deal for him in researching diseases and in talking about germs. It was a really big deal in trying to get the other doctors and everything to understand this, to study germ theory, to be able to get cures for diseases and all of that. And so it was a really big deal. So the very first things I'm studying evolution, I'm like, whoa. You're contradicting Louis Pasteur. That's not okay. So I was upset like from the start. I'm like, well, just okay, well, just let's move on. And so then move on and talk, and as it's talking about that the single cell split and formed more cells and whatever, and eventually grew and mutated to form different species. And I'm like, whoop, stop, hold on. Mutations are never good in the long run. I'm like, mutations, they're almost always bad. And most mutations, when you have a significant mutation, whatever it is, either animal, plant, or human, it's sterile. I said, so it wouldn't be able to reproduce anyway. And the minor mutations generally aren't genetic, so they don't get passed on. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Like, hold on. And then, keep studying. So I'm getting all of these questions like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And so, again, like with gravity, I thought, I'm going to find some experts. I'm reading, and I'm not finding any answers here. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And so I thought, I'm going to go and find a professor, and ask some people. And now, this was way back when. It was a little harder to find experts unless you were actually in a classroom, because the internet was not as common, and certainly not as broad. We didn't have as much information at our fingertips about this. I mean, when I was going to college, for the first couple of years anyway, the library computers had the internet, but they were 100% DOS based, entirely text. You didn't even have a mouse. So younger people aren't going to have any idea how you do that. But imagine having a computer that is nothing but a black screen and orange text coming across, not even different styles of text, no different sizes. I mean, I think you could have bold and italicized and underlined, and then regular. And that was it. Regular, bold, italicized, and underlined. And you could have combinations, whatever. But that was it. And you would use a mouse, you would use the keyboard. You would use the tab key to move from one link to another, and then space to click on a link, because you didn't have a mouse. There was no mouse on the computer. So this is how I would be researching, unless I could find a book or a person to talk to. Now, by my second and third year in college, we had Windows 3.1 was common at that point, but the college didn't have that on their computers. By the time I was in my third and fourth year, we had Windows 97, I think, had just come out, and everybody was so thrilled and excited. So then we had it then. But when I'm first doing the research, I didn't have access to all of that stuff. So I would try to I would try to talk to people. But I noticed, one thing I noticed is when I would ask these questions, I wasn't getting any answers. They would say, oh, well, this is an exception to the law. I'm like, wait, but this is still the law. I say, oh, yeah, well, that's the law in every case except when it comes to evolution. And they wouldn't say it in those words. But essentially, I mean, they would go off and just kind of roundabout. I'm like, whoa. Either it's a law or it's not a law. You can't say it's a law except when it comes to evolution. That just doesn't work. And I wasn't getting good answers. And some people would say, well, if you try it a billion times over, a trillion times over and over again, eventually it's going to work. I'm like, no, if you take a 6-sided die and roll it a billion times, you're never going to get a 7. It doesn't work. If you can't do it, you can't do it. So I'm like, I'm not saying that it can't be true. I'm saying they can't both be true. You've got this law and this theory, and they contradict each other. One of them has to be wrong. And I wasn't getting any good answers. And when I would push it, and people would just, I mean, some people would just be like, I kind of give up and just wouldn't even talk about it. Other people would actually get offended. And I mean, start accusing me. It's like, oh, what are you, a young earth creationist? I'm like, what difference does it make what I believe? I'm asking you how the theory works. This doesn't make sense. And I mean, I noticed, well, I kind of left it alone when I wasn't getting answers early on when I'm studying this. Like I said, I didn't have as many options. I didn't have as much or as many resources, I should say, as there are now. Went back to it then a couple years later, asking people back when we actually had chat rooms. So I can remember when chat rooms were invented, and you know what, nowadays, I don't know if people even know what, I mean, chat rooms then were not like chat rooms now. So anyway, but when I finally had access to a lot more people, I'll just say, and I could go and ask more people. So I started asking more people, like, can somebody explain this to me? And the responses were like talking to somebody from a cult. And growing up in a conservative Christian family, with an extended family that was some very religious, some not very religious, and some family members that were in cults. And I had talked to people who were in cults. I knew what they were like. And one thing is, well, anyway, but that was the feel I was getting from a lot of these people talking to supposed experts, people who had studied evolution. They weren't giving me answers, and they were attacking me for even asking the questions. And so I got kind of offended, and I'm like, okay, if you can't give me any reason to believe your theory and you're treating it like a religion, like a doctrine, I'm not believing it. And so I kind of just dropped it and like, forget this. I'm dismissing this as total nonsense, partly because nobody can give me answers to my questions, and partly because of the responses, of the way people talk and the people were treating me when I was asking the questions. So anyway, so all that to say, I can't say that in my studies, I'm not, the point of this video is not to disprove the theory of evolution by any means. It's to explain how I came to where I am, and why it is that, no, I don't believe in evolution. I still think it's contradictory to several different laws of science. And in studying it, I have seen many evidences, or I mean, way back when, I saw many evidences that against evolution. I'm not going to, and I prefer the word evidence because evidence I know can be interpreted in multiple ways. But when I look at it, the way I interpret it and the way it just seems obvious to me is it flies right in the face of evolution. And that was another thing too. I forgot, when I would find evidences and things like that, because I would talk to people and they'd say, oh, it is true because of all this, and this. And I'd say, well, hold on, what about this? And when I would bring up these evidences and say, explain this, because this doesn't make sense. And I mean, honest inquiry, or at least in the beginning, it was honest inquiry. Eventually it stopped just because I was just so annoyed with people. But in the beginning it was honest inquiry. And I've noticed every time I would bring up these evidences, one of three things would happen. Usually they would just dismiss it and say, it's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's not real. And I'm like, you can't. I don't believe this is a hoax. Okay. I mean, some of them may have been, but a lot of them like, no, I really don't think this is a hoax. I think somebody actually found this. And if they couldn't dismiss it as a hoax, or if they were a little more honest and said that was real, what they would do is just say, well, that can still fit in evolution because of this. And it was like everybody I talked to, in their minds, evolution was non-falsifiable. They would say, this is truth, and the only way it could be disproven is if you found this, this, and this. And I'm like, wait, somebody did actually find one of those things. Oh, well, that doesn't disprove it because we'll just say this. You'd have to find this, this, or this. And I'm like, well, actually, one of those we found too. It's like, oh, well, see, that doesn't disprove it because, and see, this is my experience over and over and over and over again. This is why I don't believe the theory of evolution. It doesn't make sense to me. And again, I know I referenced some evidences, and Shinobi was asking me last night. He's like, well, can you show me those? And I'm like, that was 20 years ago. I'm going to have to, I'm sure I could find them eventually. But again, a lot of this was literally from VHS tapes and old textbooks or our research studies from science magazines, that sort of thing, from literally decades ago. I don't know half of it probably isn't even on the internet because it's so old. I don't know. I would hope that it is somewhere, but I don't know if I could find it. Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to say. So I just wanted to, I'm not attempting here to disprove the theory of evolution. I'm not attempting to say, oh, you're an idiot if you believe it. I'm attempting to explain why it is. And sorry, my screensaver came on. Okay, there we go. I'm attempting to say why it is I don't believe it. And I haven't. I never have believed it because I wasn't taught it. So it's just that I never really thought about it until, like I say, I decided to research it on my own in my late teens. And at that point, I was very much not convinced. So anyway, it's kind of like Shinobi talks about the fact that he doesn't believe in God, but he never has. So it's just that's normal for him. My normal was that I didn't know anything about it until when I did research it, I found it very lacking, at least to me. So I still don't. I didn't dismiss it on religious grounds. I mean, as a child, I was taught it was wrong on religious grounds, but then when I started thinking for myself, I didn't accept that answer for anything anymore. I'm like, nope, I want to know for myself. Is this true or is this not? So there we go. I see that some people have jumped in and chatting. I'm curious. Okay, I'm glancing over the chat now. I have not. I hadn't been looking at it at all. But yeah. Oh, I can't remember names. Nope, I cannot remember names. Yes. Oh. Anyway. Oh. Yes, I speak very, very quickly. I'm sorry. Okay, by the way, I know I haven't streamed in a long, long time. I have been so busy, and I'm still busy. Work is not going to slow down for quite a while, unfortunately. But I want to try to get back into what's the word? Yeah, I want to get back into streaming, but can't even think right now. See, this is why one reason I don't look at the chat when I'm actually streaming, because I get so distracted. I can't remember what I'm saying. Anyway, I don't want to. So thank you guys, everybody who's here. Appreciate you guys. Hagnar, I feel like, your name is very familiar. I feel like you're the one that I've seen often. I'm not sure about the others. I'm so bad with names, so I'm impressed I remember your name, but I remember it from something. So anyway, but thank you everybody who is here. And that's all. It was just brief going over this, and I'm going to link it to Shinobi and hope that hope it explains some things. And who knows, he and I might have a further conversation at some point. Maybe he can answer some of my questions. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys all have a great day or night or morning, wherever you are. And I will hopefully talk to you guys later.